The ancient Egyptians believed in the afterlife, but unlike us, they believed the soul would split into three main parts: the Ba, Ak, and Ka. The Ba was the personality, depicted by a bird with the head of the person it once belonged to. The Ak was depicted as an ibis, and it flew to the heavens upon the death of the person. The last one is the Ka, basically what we now believe is the soul, the life force of a person that lived inside the tomb for eternity and would later ascend to the afterlife. Now, before we talk about the process of mummification, you might be wondering, why did they mummify people? It's actually because the Ka needed a vessel that could be recognized as the person it once belonged to move on to the afterlife. Now, moving on to the process of mummification. First, the brain was removed, as it rotted fairly quickly. It was removed by a hook that was inserted through the nose. Next was removing the organs. An incision was made in the abdomen to remove them, but this was seen as disrespecting the body, so stones were thrown at the person who did it. It wasn't meant to hurt the person, and it was just part of the ritual. After removing the organs, they were dried in natron, a salt mixture especially good at drying things. After being dried, the lungs, liver, intestines, and stomach were placed in special jars called canopy jars. Each of these jars were represented by one of the sons of Horus. Hapi protected the lungs, Imseti protected the liver, Duamutaf the stomach, and Kabesnehev the intestines. The body was stuffed with spices before being dried in natron for 40 days. After being dried, the body was washed with wine and then rubbed with spices before tree resins were poured on it to seal it. Finally came the wrapping process. Long strips of linen were wrapped around the body to cover it. Between the layers of linen, special amulets were placed to ensure a safe journey to the afterlife. After each layer was placed, tree resin was again poured onto it. By the time all the layers were added, it created a sort of waterproof seal. As an extra measure, a funerary mask made of a material similar to paper mache was placed on the body after being wrapped, so it could be recognized for sure. Once all these tests were completed, it was placed in a coffin. At first, these coffins were sparsely decorated, but over time they became more ornate, featuring pictures of gods and even the person's name written on it. In addition, pictures of amulets were painted all over them for more protection. As even more protection, they were placed in a sarcophagus, usually constructed out of a hard material like gold or stone, which made them almost exorbitantly expensive, only allowing them to be used by pharaohs, queens, viziers, priests, and other high-class individuals. Now was time for the journey into the afterlife. Among all of the items placed in a person's tomb was a papyrus scroll called the Book of the Dead. The scroll was filled with spells and incantations to help the person traverse the underworld, filled with all sorts of monstrosities, such as he who dances in blood and the serpent god Apep. Once getting past all these obstacles, they would be faced with 42 assessor gods that would ask them all sorts of questions relating to sins and good things they had committed in their life. Once approved by each of them, the person would face their final challenge that would decide the fate of their soul. Anubis, the god of death and mummification, will weigh the person's heart against a pure ostrich feather. If it was lighter than the person was judged pure, it was sent to the afterlife, where they tended to fields of crops. If it was heavier and judged impure, it would be consumed by Amit, a hybrid of a crocodile, leopard, and hippo. If it was consumed, the soul would cease to exist forever.